Now, I know that I am very sexy, but you all just need to control yourselves, okay? We're trying to have a conversation. Hello, folks. I hope that you have been having a lovely Pride Month, and if not, I hope it gets better for you. So, I have had a topic kind of rattling around in my head a little bit that I think it's time for me to address. And in some ways, this is going to be an amalgamation of several points that I've made elsewhere, just applied in a slightly different way. I'll bring that sort of stuff up as it becomes relevant. But you know what? Honestly, I've been doing this long enough that I think it is fair for me to call back or reiterate points that have been made in older videos. I think I've earned that at this point. Hopefully. We'll see. This isn't actually something that I had anything really recently make me think about specifically. It kind of happened tangentially. So this year with Pride, the question of kink at Pride became a very big discourse item. You want to see an excellent video on it, check out Jesse Genders. I really have nothing to add to that specific conversation. But sort of as a subset of that particular bit of discourse, I saw people either asking the question, is LGBTQIA+, is that identity, that life, that representation inherently sexual? And some other people making the assertion that, oh yeah, it definitely is. And I don't really want to talk about it necessarily in the broad strokes, but it then reminded me that one of the things that I see that is really infuriating when it comes to people complaining about the representation of queer identities in media is the idea that it is somehow sexualizing things that otherwise aren't sexualized. This comes up most often when there is queer representation in media aimed at kids. There is an accusation of sexualizing children by depicting someone of a younger age as being anything other than cisgender or heterosexual. And I kind of want to engage with that idea and the question, which, again, it's one of those things where, like, it's not a question usually asked in good faith, but I'll address it as if it were, which is that asking the question, is depicting queer identities, is it inherently sexualizing? Because I can, to a degree, understand the perspective that feels that it is. And this is kind of the first of a few things that I'm going to touch on where it references back to things I've said before. Way back when I did my video talking about the character of Bill Potts on Doctor Who. The thing that I ended up drilling in on a bit after running a whole bunch of numbers on that was talking about, okay, look, I can show you the data that says that Bill did not bring up her sexuality and her inclination towards women and her attraction to women any more than any straight companion ever brought up their attraction to men. But beyond that, it still will ping a lot of people's radar because they're not used to it. Heterosexual references fade into the background, whereas if you are not used to the representation of anything other than that, every time it comes up, it is noteworthy. It pings your radar every time. And that's kind of a little bit the angle by which I can understand why people might feel that bringing in queer identities into pop culture media, especially anything intended to be family friendly or aimed at kids, is somehow sexualizing because they aren't used to it enough for the very concept to fade into the background. Instead, it's very easy, honestly, for cis straight people to view queer identities through the lens of sexual activity. Actually, way more than most of us actually view ourselves. But it's because that's their understanding of what that term means. So when they think or they see gay representation in media, their understanding of what gay means is very much framed around sex. Now, it's no more framed around sex than straight people are, but straight people are so normalized that you can see a straight couple and your brain will not immediately go to that place. And to be completely fair, there is an argument to be made that showing young characters expressing same-sex attractions is sexualizing to a degree, insofar as it is displaying their sexuality. Now, is it sexualizing in the sense of it's meant to make them appear sexy to an audience? It's not like, no, it's not. But it is putting their sexuality on display. But the thing is, if this is sexualizing, then so is this. Now, this is where I'm going to circle back around to another older video. When I did my video talking about whether or not representation is inherently political, when I started that project, my thought was that I was going to make the argument, no, it's not inherently political. What do you want about? But instead, I ended up coming at it from the angle of, no, representing anyone who is underrepresented is political, but so is not representing them. So is showing same-sex attractions for characters, whether they are in adult media or children-targeted media, is that sexualizing? Yes. But so is showing a straight crush. But you don't complain about that because you're used to it. Because it's part of your normal. That's the thing. We very rarely even register things that we have accepted as normal, much less think to complain about them, unless it is a normal that is harmful to us. And I suppose, to be fair, the far end of this argument is to claim that normalizing queer identities is harmful, but I'm not going there. But there's another side to this. Now, up to this point, I have been using the term queer identities, which is a umbrella term for the entire LGBTQIA plus spectrum, which would include trans people, gender fluid people like me, non-binary, two-spirit, bigender, agender, any of those sorts of folks. Now, while I am prepared to give a little bit of understanding and a little bit of leeway as to why people who are not used to seeing representation can look at a same-sex attraction between two characters and feel that that is sexualizing. I, again, am arguing it's not any more than the stuff you're not complaining about, but I can at least understand that perspective and go, okay, I see how you got there, but let's kind of deal with that. However, anyone who claims that a gender identity other than cisgender is sexualizing can go eat a bag of dicks. Because nothing about one's gender identity is inherently sexual. Your sexuality is who you are attracted to. Your gender identity is who you are. Now, one can influence the other, or at least what labels you use to explain what the other is. If your identity is female and your attractions are to female, that will affect what label you use, choosing the label of lesbian most likely. But they're not actually the same thing. Who I see myself as is a completely different conversation and a completely different experience from who I am attracted to. In other words, if you feel that depicting trans youth is sexualizing children, the sexualization is something you are bringing to the table, and you need to really stop and think about that. Now, I am going to not really extend an olive branch, but at least glance in the direction of one. And I will say that I suspect part of the reason, other than just willful ignorance, which is the thing, but if I am being as generous as I can conceivably be, I do get that a lot of people do not properly understand the separation between sexuality and gender identity. But you know what? That's a you problem. And if you see a trans character, especially a young trans character, and you think that is sexualizing, possibly because your brain immediately goes to the question that so many people's brains go to, especially these days in the toxic soup that is the discourse, your brain goes to, what's their junk? Well, in a way, it is sexualizing completely within your own head. You may find yourself thinking about what is that person have going on below their waist. But again, that's a you problem. All that person or character is doing is existing. And if it is causing you to think thoughts that make you uncomfortable, you need to unpack, why are you thinking those thoughts at all? And if you think they are things you should not be thinking about, like wondering about the downstairs apparatus of underage characters, because you're right, you shouldn't be thinking about that, then maybe do a little self-searching and wonder why your brain immediately goes to what's in somebody's pants when you find out they're anything other than cis. This is where the cultural education, which is way too damn slow on everything, not just on this, let's be honest. But this is why cultural education is important, and it's why normalization is important. Because when trans people and people with non-cisgender identities are viewed as not normal, then when people who see them or see representation of them, their brain starts calculating all the ways in which it isn't normal. And because none of this stuff is normalized to the majority of the population, their brain is going to go to the major differences. And what's one of the major differences? Well, gender identity. What's one of the things that results from that? Well, they might have had their junk changed. Ooh, what was it originally? Ooh, what is it now? It's a fairly natural thought progression. But it's one you kind of need to train yourself to stop doing. Because what is going on below the belt of any person, whether they're trans, whether they're cis, whether they're a real person, or whether they're a fictional character, unless you are watching porn, it's not any of your business. And so when you claim that representing people like me, or like any of a bajillion other identities possible other than cisgender, and you think inherently that's sexualizing, no, only in your head. And similarly, with the depiction of same-sex attractions, is that sexualizing? A little. No more than the stuff that you let pass. If you think it's cute for a preteen male character to be crushing on a female character, but it's gross and sexualizing for that exact same situation, but instead of them crushing on a female character, it's a male character crushing on a male character, that just speaks to your biases. Because the only thing that changed about that circumstance, the only thing that changed, no new depictions, exact same interactions, you think one's cute and the other's gross, then that one thing that is different is what you think is gross. And so if you're thinking that, and you also think, I don't have bigoted thoughts towards gay people, maybe you need to examine that a little more closely. And it's okay if you need to do that. I've said repeatedly in the last year or so, your gut reaction is something you really don't have a lot of control over. I get that. But a lot of folks really need to examine what those gut reactions are, why they have them, and really ask the questions. What does it say about me that this is my gut reaction? Because the very natural thing is to assume that whatever you feel is correct. I mean, that's kind of our default. That's how most of us go through life. We operate on a base assumption that what we as a person think and process, we come from an assumption that we're probably right. But if we don't challenge that, if we don't put that to the test, then we start putting a lot of weight into gut reactions that we haven't examined and we don't know why we're having them and may potentially be incredibly harmful. When people say they think representation is sexualizing, what they're saying is, this makes me think about sex that makes me uncomfortable. But nothing about these depictions is forcing you to think that. You are doing that on your own. And if your brain is going places you don't want it to, it's not the responsibility of creators to make you comfortable. And especially if the only thing that is different from something that you are comfortable with is the existence of a queer person. That's the point where you either need to own up to your biases and just admit to them, or work on them. And it's okay to work. I still have work to do. Pretty much everybody does. That's okay. But don't tell us we're the ones sexualizing characters in entertainment when you're the ones who look at us and can't stop yourself thinking about who we bang or what we're packing. Because honestly, you think about it more than we do. The notion that making a character queer is inherently sexualizing, needed to get that off my chest. Hope you found it helpful, thought-provoking, not terrible. Let's go with that. Let's settle for that. I'll be happy. So whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. I have a Patreon, which is how I pay my bills. This is my living. Any amount you are able to support me with, there are rewards for every tier, including early access to videos, a Patreon exclusive Discord, and other perks. There's also YouTube memberships if you want to go that route, but you don't have to. The usual stuff of like, share, subscribe helps me out as well, but I'm not going to give you too much pressure on that either. Because at the end of the day, I want you to remember that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.